sit down, make yourselves comfortable. Listen, I am so happy to see so many of you showing up today because on a Friday afternoon like this, I know there's lots of people who'd be choosing to do something different. So I'm really, really pleased to see so many of you come out to be part of this conversation. Because for me, this is what democracy, this is what politics, this is what engaged citizenship is supposed to be all about. An opportunity to get to know each other a little bit, an opportunity for me to be able to hear things that are on your mind, the opportunity for you to be able to hear me share some of the thinking behind the decisions that we end up taking in your name that are going to be shaping the future of this country and of the world for many, many years to come. So this opportunity nice thing that I get to do every now and then. It's one of the most important things that I get to do as Prime Minister and as leader. Because particularly in these times, if you don't stay aware and listening and conversing with the people that you get to serve in jobs like these, then it's really easy to not be serving right, not be listening and hearing and what you're actually needing to do. So that's why I'm really glad to be here. But I've been doing these for many, many years since I got elected. We stopped a bit during the pandemic. But then as I'm back here now, I've realized that this is a more important exercise than ever before. Because the confluence of events that you, particularly as young people, but that all Canadians are dealing with right now, are really overwhelming. I mean, you think about it. We've had this climate change crisis that's been going on for years now that you've all been very aware of since you were kids, but that really now is picking up a huge amount of urgency, of impact, from extreme hurricanes to more wildfires to droughts to floods. You're seeing the tangible impacts of what decades of insufficient action by the world has been on it. And that's causing a lot of anxiety and worry about what the future is holding, particularly with the kind of urgency we're hearing from all scientists and everyone who's saying we need to act on it. So that's a lot to deal with for you. But you mix that in with a pandemic that came and disrupted the entire world. All the supply chains went through on a personal level to all of you, really difficult times where people have been struggling with isolation, with mental health, and with particularly the consequences of that's having far-reaching impacts. Of course, that led to challenges around supply chain disruptions, so inflation, which led to interest rates, challenges in the geopolitics around the world as Russia decides to invade Ukraine and overturn close to 80 years of a consensus around what the rules-based order and the UN Charter has allowed for in terms of, just because someone has a bigger army doesn't mean they get to redraw lines on a map. Combine that with the kind of anxieties that's coming with the backsliding of democracy around the world, where there are fewer democracies in the world today than there were 10 or 20 years ago. And that's not the direction of travel we were supposed to be in. There's a whole bunch of people, for very real reasons, worried about where things are going. Add to that the lingering after effects of the 2008 recession, in which it became clear that just growth itself wasn't going to deliver opportunities for everyone. You could create more money, you could create more prosperity, but what we've seen over the past decades is it tends to accrue to the very top, and the middle class in our countries, in our democracies, have been falling further behind from 2008 onwards. And there's always a couple of different choices on that different countries have taken in terms of options. One is the option of right-wing populism. Hearing the anger, hearing the frustration people are having, reflecting it back to them. Amplifying it. Yes, you should be mad as hell. We saw that happening in the United States over the past 4 years, or starting 2 years ago. We saw what that led to. Led to threats to rip up the most successful trade deal the world has ever seen in the threats to destroy NAFTA. We saw it in terms of insularity, looking inwards, protectionism that actually hurts the economy. But people were angry and looking for solutions. Well, from 2015 onwards, this government tried a different approach. It said, instead of just reflecting back the anger, let's try and put forward real solutions that'll build up opportunities for everyone. And not sit back on the trickle-down ideas that, well, if you create wealth, it'll eventually trickle down to everyone, that the rising tide will lift all boats. Well, it hasn't, and it didn't. Until we started doing something differently in Canada. First thing we did, lower taxes on the middle class, raise them on the wealthiest 1%. Brought in a Canada Child Benefit that made a huge impact in lifting kids out of poverty and lifting families out of poverty across the country. And we spent a lot of time talking about 3 different things that I thought were really, really important to growing the economy. First one was protecting the environment and fighting climate change. Second one was investing in the middle class and making sure that everyone has a real and fair chance to succeed. Inclusive policies, policies like childcare and Canada Child Benefit and women's equality and reduction of barriers and fighting anti-black racism, fighting systemic discrimination. That was the second bucket. And the third bucket was understanding that reconciliation with Indigenous peoples needs to be a priority for Canada. And while I was busy talking about all those 3 things for the past number of years, environment, strong inclusive economy, or strong inclusive society, and reconciliation, you had a lot of folks in the editorial pages of the newspapers saying, when's he going to start talking about the economy? Because that's what matters to people. And what we get to see now, 8 years in, is that everything we've been doing around fighting climate change is what led us to that Volkswagen announcement today. It's what led companies around the world to look at what we're doing in Canada in preparing for the future and wanting to be part of it. It's what led ArcelorMittal Dofasco, just up the road in Hamilton, to decide, it was in Hamilton, they were going to build the first of their large steel plants to move away from coal-fired to move to electric arc, which secures jobs for many more generations than just the 3 generations of steelworkers we see all the time in Hamilton. And on inclusive, growing communities and opportunities for everyone to succeed. Well, combine the Canada Child Benefit with $10 a day childcare, with improvements in public health care, with dental care access, with great investments in education and research and training, investments in housing, lots of work on lifting up the middle class, and suddenly there is a workforce, there are communities in which people who are facing labor shortages around the world are able to say, wow, Canada's growing, because as we do that, we can really, really positive ways. And that's not just the government open to immigration, that's Canadians themselves who understand that they're getting jobs. And finally, working in respect with Indigenous peoples is how you get projects like mines and new roads and new infrastructures and energy opportunities across the country. Partnership. These are things that the world is starting to learn. So all those things together are coming into a cohesive view of how to build an economy that works for all Canadians. But that, what I just laid out, it's hard to, or a tweet. It's politics in complete sentences, as my old friend Nahid Nenshi, former mayor of Calgary, used to point out. It's, shout out for, there you go, Calgary, there we go, we got applause from Calgary. Politics requires us to have real conversations. And one of the things that we see with social media, with the amplification of everyone shouting but nobody really listening is a breakdown of the kinds of conversations we actually have to be having in politics, where people get to share not just their solutions, but their perspective and the values underpinning it, and are willing to put those values and that perspective on the table. Something. What you have to be is genuinely open to the idea that they might be able to convince you that they are right about something. If you go into a conversation so sure you're right, you're not even going to entertain the fact that maybe there's another way of looking at something, you're breaking down the fabric of what a diverse, inclusive society and community can be. And that's where these kinds of conversations, where we get to hear different perspectives and respond to people's views, and I get to share some of the things I've been thinking about, are so important to democracy. And I certainly thank Peter for helping us facilitate this here today. I want to thank Ariel and Peter, our local MPs, here for facilitating it. Josh, I want to really thank you for everything you're doing to make London into an even more inclusive and livable city. And I want to thank all of you for being here. So with that, we're going to get into the fun part, questions and answers. What I'll do is I'll take 3 questions at a time, and then I'll try and answer them. We'll try to get to as many different answers as we can. And I will start with this group here. So who has a question for me to kick things off? Yes, you. Go ahead, right away. Share me your name, and we'll start.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And what's your name?
My name is Winnie Muhumuza. I come from Rwanda. And I must say that I'm very happy to be here. My question, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister, is maybe it's a request, not a question. As an international student, I realized that it's a lot of work to work and pay the very high tuition. Is there a possibility that you could reduce the burden for the international students in the room and the school? I'm into early childhood education, and when I go to our child care centers, I realize that the payment is also minimal. So those are my 2 requests, like can you reduce one and increase the other? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Another question from here. I'll take 3 questions from this section here. Nobody else with a question? There you are. There you go. Stand up. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ibikunle Olatunji. I am a business analyst student of Fanshawe College. I'm from Nigeria. Good afternoon, Your Excellency, Prime Minister of Canada. I'm so pleased to be here. I don't have a question actually. I have a comment and a concern. Like I said, I'm from Nigeria, and what I'm going to say here is, I believe it's going to speak to what's on the minds of more than 80% of blacks that are here. It's been tough. I've been here since November, and I can tell you I've been trying to seek an employment, part-time employment, since November. Up to now, I've not been able to get one. Not because I've not made attempts, not because I've not made effort, but what we discover is that there are some entities there seem to be some form of, that's my view, and that's the view of a couple of black guys here too. There seem to be some form of favoritism. That's the way we see it. So, for example, I have colleagues in my class who have probably a different, I don't want to use skin color from mine, go for the same opportunity, and they get the job, you don't get it as a black guy. And, let me see your resume. Probably there's something I'm not doing right. And when you look at those resumes, you discover that probably what you have seem to fit into the job descriptions that have been mentioned, than even what your colleagues are getting, in terms of opportunities. So why I'm mentioning this is the fact that we don't think this is something that should go on. We think everyone should have opportunity, or rather everyone should have equal opportunity, you know. Let's put our best foot forward. Let everyone show what he or she can do. I mean, rather than giving certain people opportunities over the other people. That's all we are trying to request. And it's something that a lot of us are going through. And it's not, you know, like she said, they have bills to pay, house rent and the likes. I came with my family, for example, and it's been tough. Yeah. You know, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. One last question from this section. There you go, right in the front.
My name is Yamade. My program is International Business Management. So my question is in reference to elementary school. I want to know what's your position or what's going to happen in terms of promoting science and also financial literacy. Because I'm of the opinion that if we push financial literacy, I think we're going to have less challenges with people understanding how to manage their money and how to manage their finances. And I'm saying that from personal view. In terms of the science, I have had to call the school and ask, okay, what are you guys doing for my son who is really interested in science? And I was told, oh, this is what we're going to do based on the curriculum. So I just want to know what can be done to support children who are, should I say, gifted or who have an interest in that? Because when you look at other programs outside, it's really expensive. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Three great questions. First of all, Winnie, hearing you from Rwanda, I can't but reflect that this month is a sad anniversary, as it always is. The anniversary of the Rwandan genocide that shocked the world in so many ways and caused us all to reflect on the responsibility we have to step up as an international community, even when something is going on within another country's borders. We all have a responsibility to stand up for human rights, for the dignity of life, and unfortunately it was a lesson we all learnt and we continue to learn these days. But I'm thinking of you and everyone from Rwanda on this anniversary. In terms of high tuition, first of all, let me be, Canada subsidizes massively every student in schools across this country. We've helped schools like Fanshawe and others invest in the kinds of equipment and the kinds of professional teachers and the kind of everything that is offered is way more expensive per student than it is for a student to go here, even an international student. But it's closer to what it actually costs for an international student. Because good education is expensive, but it's also an investment in the future of society, which is why countries that are smart invest in themselves, invest in their education systems, because they know whatever it costs to make sure a kid goes through and gets the best education as far as they possibly can, it gets benefited to the country in terms of, not just in terms of taxes, but in terms of production, in terms of livable communities and all that. So it's an investment the country makes. But countries don't have infinite amounts of money. We have to make choices. How much goes into education? How much goes into healthcare? How much goes into different things? And therefore, we have to figure out what the best use of that money is. And people who are Canadian often come from families who have paid taxes over many, many years or generations sometimes. But even new Canadians have made the efforts to commit themselves to Canada, to stay here and to take the benefit of their education and stay in Canada for the future. So of the limited amount of funds that we have, we choose to put most of it into making sure that every Canadian has access to the best education they possibly can. International students, we're happy to have international students because many international students come and they stay and they contribute to Canada throughout the rest of their lives. The others take what the great things they've learned from Canada, go back home and improve the lives of their community at home and have ties to Canada that is enriching us as a country. But there are millions upon millions more international students out there than we can ever accept in Canada in any given year. And therefore, we get to make choices about who gets to come in. And one of the ways, unfortunately, we make that choice is by saying, okay, because we're going to invest in supporting Canadian students first and foremost to go through education, the fees for international students are going to be higher. So it's about choices. It's not always fun or fair for international students, but this is a case where Canadians expect us to making sure that they can afford education as best as you can, regardless of their socioeconomic background. Although we have made some changes for international students in longer hours of being able to work off campus, in terms of extension of work permits particularly as well. Like there's things we're doing to try and understand that there are real challenges that international students are going through, and that's part of it. In terms of childcare, we just signed deals with all the provinces and territories to cut childcare fees in half last year, and there are 6 provinces. The great news is there are 6 provinces and territories that have already brought their $10 a day childcare in as a reality right across the country. Bad news is Ontario is not there yet. It take a few more years to get down to $10 a day, but it's on the way. But it's not just about affordability, it's also about making more spaces and ensuring high-quality jobs for early childhood educators, properly paid to get high-quality spaces. Those are some of the things we're working on. Ibiko, anti-black racism is a reality. Unfortunately, it's something that we have to admit and reflect on in Canada. And Canada spends a lot of time looking at what happens in the United States, whether it's on healthcare or whether it's on gun violence or whether it's on racism. And, we sort of say, oh gosh, it's so much better to be in Canada. That's not automatically true. I mean, relatively, yes, it's better to be in Canada than the United States on those issues. But it doesn't mean we don't have racism in Canada. On the contrary. We've always been much more open to multiculturalism and diversity, but there is still overt individual racism, and there's still lots of systemic institutional racism. Unconscious bias, anti-black racism, systemic discrimination are all realities in Canada. We're seeing anti-Asian racism, particularly spiking following the pandemic. We're seeing a lot of Islamophobia, we're seeing anti-Semitism. And unfortunately, that all seems to be getting a little bit worse. It's all getting a little bit more. So we all have to be so attentive and so vigilant about how we stand against it. It's not just for the community that's being discriminated against to say, hey, I'm being discriminated against. It's for all of us as Canadians. Because one of the things we value, one of the things we've done incredibly well as a country is being open to differences. Open to diversity, looking at difference as a source of strength, not a source of weakness, which is real, which is what Canada does better than just about anyone else in the world, but still doesn't mean we're perfect, far from it. So Vika, I'm really sorry to hear the challenges that you're facing, but I want you to know that you have a lot of friends and allies in this room and around who will continue to stand with you and try to make sure that we are changing mindsets, we are changing approaches, we are challenging systems that continue to put in barriers for people who come from different places or have different skin colors or different religions or different languages. This country only works, this world only works if we're making sure that everyone has a real and fair chance to succeed, to contribute, to create stronger communities, and that's something we need to continue to do. So I thank you very much for sharing your experience. I know London has grown a lot over the past years in its diversity. What was, a generation or two ago, a much less diverse city has bloomed in wonderfully positive ways, but sometimes it takes a while to catch up to that, and I really hope you stick with it because we need you and your family here in London. And Jomare, as I will tell you, as a former As a former high school and elementary school teacher, I love your focus and your challenge on being able to give the very best opportunities to your son and making sure that that K-12 education is responding to the very real needs. At the federal government, we've created coding programs. We've invested in a lot of STEM education elements. We've really moved forward on a lot of different things. And financial literacy is something the federal government is trying to spread. But ultimately, the way our country is designed is the provinces get to decide what happens at the K-12 education. We do a little bit on the early learning and childcare before 5 or 6 years old. We invest a lot in colleges and universities afterwards. But for K-12 education, you're going to need to continue to advocate with another politician. So when provincial politicians show up for town halls like this, I encourage you to bring that up as well. But as a teacher, I'm right there with you. As a father who has kids who went through the Ontario public education system, I hear you on that one. We're going to keep pushing for it as well. Thank you very much. All right, let's go to 3 questions from this section. Yes, you in the middle, first off. Hey, hang on, we'll get you that mic right there.
Hello, I'm Nelson Nicholas. You can call me Dandelion, and I'm taking Power Motive Technician, Automotive, MTA 7, and I'm finishing this course this year. Actually, I just finished my finals, so I have no sleep.
Congratulations.
So I have a wonderful, serious question regarding apprentices, and also regarding about the electric vehicles that is bringing it here. So the thing is that I've been job hunting for 2 weeks just for an apprenticeship. I went to Toyota Town and Wellington just to do apply for apprenticeship, and then I have plans on May to go to Ottawa and Windsor. So my concern is that since electric vehicles are coming here in Canada, and I know you announced that Volkswagen, the VW group, the Stellantis group, are building an electric battery plant producing lithium-ion batteries. So my concern is that what will happen as apprentices who are graduating as an international student, because I myself having a hard time finding apprenticeship here in London. So I may have to travel around, not just here in London, but entire Canada or probably entire Ontario just to find apprentices. And the thing is that aside from what will happen to us, not just apprentices, but also to our mechanics or future mechanics like us. What will happen to our job if electric vehicles is going to be a mandatory? Hey, you have to buy an electric vehicle, say bye-bye to your fuel internal combustion engine. So that's my concern here. And the thing is that this is really my concern. And us, not just automotive, but any other trade that does need apprenticeship, they are having a hard time finding apprentices. So is there any way, as the Prime Minister and as the government, I don't want to act like James May here from Top Gear, but the thing is that what will government do if apprentices are having a hard time finding jobs? Because I don't want not just me, myself, but other future graduates that is graduating this year having a hard time finding apprentices, and they decided to go home. And that's the problem. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Dandelion. Another question. Yeah, you in the back. Yep.
Hi. My name is Owen Denbreaker. I am a first-year electrical apprenticeship student, and I'm sure a lot of other young people in this room, am feeling intimidated by the prospect of moving out soon. My question to you is, what is being done about the cost of living crisis?
Great question, Owen. Thank you. Yes, you. Yep.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Sarah Dick, and I am a baking and pastry arts management student at the downtown campus in London here. My question for you, Prime Minister, is do you have any plans to increase awareness of trades in cities? So I come from a small town that's about 2 hours north of London here, and we have a wonderful program set up. I live near Bruce Power, so they support our community a lot, and we have this wonderful place called Launchpad. Shout out to Launchpad in Hanover. And they provide activities for students and elementary kids to try the trades, to try welding and auto mechanics and baking and sewing and everything like that. And they learn financial literacy there as well. And it's fairly cheap for them. It's subsidized partly by Bruce Power and local community organizations, and I know some of the Ontario and Canadian government. I'm just wondering if there's going to be more funding put into the cities for that, because I know I've talked to people who are from the cities, and they are pushed more towards academics versus trades. And as someone who considered both, as I am going into baking, that's more of a trade than an academic, it's interesting to see like how different that is between, like, in the city you have two different schools you go to. If you want to go to the trades, you go to a different high school than you go for academics, and you have to make that decision in grade 8. That is a very scary decision to make in grade 8. You are 13 years old, if that. So I think it would be really important for us to have more like education on trades and stuff like that, and I'm wondering if you guys are putting any steps towards that. Sorry.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. First of all, one of the questions that come through all three is the importance of trades, the importance of apprenticeships, and the job market that's out there. There are huge opportunities in the trades all across the country. When we look at where the labor shortages are most acute, it's in skilled trades of all different types. So we're talking a lot about the fact that there's a labor shortage, that there are jobs out there that just can't get filled. The kinds of skills and, quite frankly, the kind of focus that places like Fanshawe take on what is needed out there. There's some universities that look at, the graduation rates or the grades of graduation rates. I know places like Fanshawe, one of the key, or colleges in general across the country, one of the key metrics is, what's the rate of placement? How many people graduate from a given class and go straight into a good job that they've been trained for in that class? And that's one of the big shifts in how much colleges and trade schools have contributed to our economic growth in really, really meaningful ways. But Dandelion, you bring up a really good point. We've made the announcement that all new cars in this country bought as of 2035, barely 10 years from now, 12 years from now, are going to be battery electric. Zero-emission vehicles. That's a massive shift. Now, I'm someone who's always been a bit of a tinkerer. I love thinking about how engines work, how motors work, and everything. Last time I opened the hood of my car, I looked at it. This is a few years ago when I still had a car. Even then, it's all computers. You bring it to a gas station or a garage for a checkup. First thing they do is they plug it into the machine and look at the diagnostics on it. Everything is always evolving. Right? There are always going to be new challenges that come up, new skills to learn, new abilities to do it. I can tell you we're going to have internal combustion engines and variations on that on the road for many, many decades, even as we shift towards electric vehicles. So your skills as a mechanic are going to be just fine for the next 10 years. But if anyone expects that the skills they learnt, this semester are still going to be 100% applicable and relevant, even if you're in baking, Sarah, 10 years from now or 20 years from now, without you learning new tricks, without you learning new techniques, without you, going back to school for a 6-week refresher course 8 years from now, or whatever, then you're not being honest with yourself, or you're not being open about the pace of change that we're dealing with in the world. There is no question that the shift towards lower emitting sources of energy, the shift towards electric vehicles, the shift towards more hydrogen production and wind and a renewal of nuclear are going to bring all sorts of amazing, important, great, gritty jobs in the coming decades, in the coming years in this country. And we're going to have to make sure as governments and educational institutions that we are keeping up with where the jobs are coming. There's an old classic line around buggy whip manufacturers who used to work for horse and carriages. And as soon as the automobile came along, a whole bunch of people who were great at building buggy whips to keep those horses moving fast lost their jobs. They had to change and retrain. And that's where, as we're moving forward into a world that's changing quicker and quicker, the investments in retraining and education to follow you along, to give you the skills that are going to be able to adapt, to take what you know about differentials and what you know about transmissions and maybe some of what you know about internal combustion engines, but lots that you know about air conditioning units and all sorts of other things for vehicles, is going to continue to be applicable and allow you to grow into the new jobs that are going to come, not tomorrow, but over the next years, over the next decade. Because clinging to the past and the way things used to be, you can stretch things out a little bit. What that means is you suddenly reach a cliff where you can't do it anymore. Whereas what we're trying to do in Canada is lean in and lead and be on that cutting edge of that change, because this is where the world is going. And Canada is right now in a position where we're a step forward on many of our allies and friends. The United States lost 4 years in the fight against climate change, in investing in clean electricity and energy. And that's why President Biden had to put forward such a massive hundreds of billions of dollars of an IRA to try and make up for lost time on what Canada has been building steadily for the past 8 years. But yeah, the world's going to keep changing, and you are going to have to get out there and shop your skills around to find the best place. But I can tell you that the kind of investments we're drawing in from Volkswagen, from Stellantis, from others, the kinds of opportunities that are going to be there for jobs in the future are really exciting and will continue to be. Owen, your question about housing and cost of living is huge. One of the most important things we can do to help you with cost of living is to make sure you have a good job that's well paid. Because that's the building block of our success. Right now, we've gone through a particularly difficult time with really, really high inflation and interest rates coming up, making mortgages and rents more expensive as well. That's really squeezing people extremely hard right now. Now, one of the challenges that we've faced over the past year is the government can't simply say, okay, we're going to send everyone $1,000 and that'll help you get through it, because then the average price of everything just goes up by $1,000 and all you've done is feed inflation and we're not actually helping people. So we've had to be really targeted in the supports we've given out. For example, in the fall, we doubled the GST rebate for 11 million of the Canadians who needed it most, and that was a few extra $100 that made a real difference. We move forward on things like a dental benefit to make sure that kids 12 and under whose families don't have insurance and don't make enough money to pay for dental care, or $90,000 or less, so that's still pretty generous, are able to get dental care. That was something we announced here in London just a few months ago. We're moving forward now, even as we're seeing inflation coming down, because inflation is down to 4.3%. It's on its way back down to probably 3% by the summer, and it'll be a lot better. Food prices are still really high. That's why we brought in a grocery rebate, that for 11 million of the Canadians who are most struggling, they're going to get a few $100s more to help with the price of groceries. But the big thing is that we don't want to make inflation worse. We need to be there for people, even in putting forward a rental benefit for the lowest income renters so they can get a extra benefit, but it always has to be targeted. And our focus on this throughout is going to be on creating more growth and more opportunities and better jobs in the economy. And on the jobs front, Canada's doing really, really well. We restored full employment from everything lost during the pandemic 6 months before the United States in terms of bouncing back from the pandemic. And the United States' recovery was still pretty strong, but we did that much better. And now, because of child care investments we made, we have more women in the workforce than we've ever had in Canada over the past few months, because that is that quick to make people have that, give people that choice that they didn't have they had to make between career and family. Like, these are things that make a big difference. Housing, as you talk about going out on your own, huge challenge. Are young people today going to be able to do that same thing that our parents' generation did, of buy a starter home and then upgrade throughout the course of your life as you're able to build equity in that? Huge challenges. We're investing in doubling the amount of new housing constructions over the coming years. We're investing in everything from housing accelerators to work with municipalities, to rapid housing investments, to fighting homelessness investments, to first-time homebuyers, savings accounts, and advantages. There's no one thing that's going to be able to unlock it, but a big piece of it is making sure there's no shortages in the construction trades, making sure that there are no shortages in construction to be able to make sure we're building more houses. And that's where immigration is actually a solution on housing, and not just a creator of more problems of housing shortages, because as we bring in people to work in the construction industry, we can create even more homes. Right now there is a bit of a mismatch in our economy and more pressures on young people than they should be having. That's why, first of all, anyone who promises one simple solution that's going to fix it, it's not going to go there. It takes a whole bunch of different programs in different pieces, but the biggest one is making sure that you get that great job as an electrician, that you get that future that you need to have, that is going to be able to have you build that equity, provide for your family, and build a career around that. And I know you're going to be able to do it, Owen. Thank you very much. All right, take a couple questions from this section here. Yes, you in the mask. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Kim, and I'm a first-year respiratory therapy student. My question was with regard to healthcare and training. So many Canadians are without a family doctor. Family doctors and just doctors in general are retiring so quickly, and it's been in the news that you're looking overseas for doctors to replace. I was just wondering what's being done in order to try to train more Canadian doctors, because there just aren't enough spots open in residencies or in the medical schools. So I'm just wondering if anything's being done towards that.
Great question. Another question? Yes, you in the t-shirt.
Hey, my name is...
Go ahead. Sorry.
Thanks.
No, I was talking to her. She also put her... looking straight at you, and I sort of straight past her, so I'll come to you. Sorry. Go ahead. What's your name? Sorry.
My name's Jake Willett. I am also in the electrician apprentice program. And to expand on what he's saying about the cost of living, the corporations and, for example, Loblaws are making record profits, while majority of us are trying to put money certain places and not having money to reinvest, especially as young people. Is there any plan to kind of move that around? Like could you possibly cap how corporations like that are able to increase prices to make record profits when everybody else is having a hard time?
No, it's a great question and one that a lot of people have. Thank you, Jake. And your question.
Hi, sir. I'm Tanisha Bartwal. I'm in the business co-op program here at Fanshawe. I'm an international student, and I want to ask you, since London is the city where, and Fanshawe means temple in the woods, so London is the city where we learn, we grow. We've got Weston here, and we've got Fanshawe, and we've just got so many children, so many students, and the youth, the population is growing. So what is your plan for the youth, and how do you plan on engaging and having the resources reach the people, having the resources reach the students, so they could help the country and use their potential to their maximum?
Thank you. On healthcare, first of all, we just signed historic agreements with the provinces on investments in healthcare. But as you know, the healthcare delivery is provincial, so the federal government has really two big roles around healthcare. One is to help fund the system. The second is to make sure that the system continues to abide by the principles and rules of the Canada Health Act, which means free public healthcare, universal public healthcare system. We don't get to tell provinces exactly what to do with the delivery of health care because they have the jurisdiction according to the Constitution. But we do and did want to make sure that money we were putting into health care, as we're promising almost $200 billion more dollars over the next 10 years into health care, actually delivers concrete and real results for Canadians. Which it hasn't always in the past. Just throwing more money into the healthcare system sometimes hasn't led to better outcomes. So we actually anchored in 4 areas that are going to have to be measurably improved over the coming years in the provinces, and the levels of which they improve each one will be on sliders that they get to pick what the configuration is. But the first area, more family doctors. We know that when people have access to a family doctor, it eases every other pressure within the system. That's the entry point for most individuals or families. Instead of going to the emergency room, having a family doctor to steer you through the system, to give you that support right away is really, really important. So we are making sure that there is increased investments to make that happen, including more training spaces, more programs across the country as the provinces will decide. The other areas are better access to mental health care services in timely, rapid, and responsible ways, better support for frontline workers and medical professionals, and that means international license recognition and qualifications recognition, but also pan-Canadian recognition. If you get trained to be a family doctor in BC, sure, maybe there's a little bit of tweaking that you need to get in a quick course to make sure you can teach practice in Ontario. But it's not going to be that different, and we should do a better job of recognizing that. That's part of what we're moving forward to create those advantages. And then finally, the fourth area is better metrics, better measurement of what the outcomes are in comparable ways across the country. So better data doesn't just mean we can compare what's working better in one part of the country to the next. It also means we're able to ensure that patients have better access to reliable medical data for themselves, so the specialist or the emergency room doctor they go to can actually see what their medical history is. So these are huge changes that we're working on with the provinces right now to sign deals where they are going to commit to a lot more family doctors, and part of that is going to be more schools, more training, but also quicker recognition of qualifications to move forward on that. Thank you for that question. Jake, it sort of goes to one of the challenges that we laid out that I talked about earlier, the fact that the wealthy seem to be getting wealthier over these past decades, and hardworking people, hardworking Canadians seem to be falling further and further behind. We need to find the right balance. You want people to be able to work hard and succeed, and that means some people are going to succeed more than others. But we also need to make sure that everyone who works hard, everyone with a job across the country, is able to support their family, is able to build a future for themselves. And getting that balance right has always been a challenge in a democratic, free market economy like Canada's. We've always looked for that balance with a much stronger social safety net, for example, than the United States, where survival of the fittest and a much more lackluster approach to a social safety net, whether it's on universal health care, whether it's on supports for low-income families, like a Canada Child Benefit, whether it's supports for seniors, has always been a real challenge there. We have moved forward on very specific measures. When we came through the pandemic and it was obvious that the biggest banks and insurance companies had made huge amounts of profits through the pandemic, while everyone else was making sacrifices, we actually brought in measures that put extra revenue from the most successful financial institutions, so we could put that back into the economy and support Canadians. We're always going to look at fairness, and there's a lot of people asking some very, very tough questions of companies like Loblaws that continue to put up huge profits at the same time as Canadians are paying more and more for groceries than ever should be. But using the Competition Bureau, using responsible measures, but also doing things like what we've had. We brought in a minimum tax rate, for example, to make sure that all the various exceptions and financial measures and accountant measures that the wealthiest can go through to make sure that they don't pay much taxes, that they still end up paying the kind of percentage of taxes on their income that other Canadians make, the Canadians who work hard every day for their salaries, where the wealthiest make money in dividends and profits and shares and those sorts of things. So we are working very, very hard to make the system fairer in order to be able to be there to support the people who are at the core of the economy. Hardworking individuals like you, Jake, like you hope to be, and like families across the country who are building this community and building this country every single day with your work. Denisha, what are we doing for young people? There are no more interest payments to make on student loans. We eliminated that permanently. You take a loan for your education, you don't have to pay interest on it. Whether it's a Canada student loan or an apprenticeship loan, no more interest payments on that, because this is an investment in our future as much as it is on yours. There used to be a rule that you wouldn't have to start paying back your student loans until you were making $20,000, $25,000 a year minimum. We've now boosted that up, so you don't have to start paying back your student loans until you're making $40,000 a year minimum, and that's a level of solidity that makes a difference. We've also increased the amounts of student loans and grants as well, because this is the kind of investments we need to make in the future. And we're making sure that those go to trades and apprenticeships as well, because to go back to Sarah's question, how are we promoting people getting into the trades? We're talking about the great jobs and the solid community building lifestyles that we can build when people get those trades that aren't offshoreable. If you're a plumber or a welder or an electrician, there's no country on the other side of the world that's going to be able to do that job for a homeowner here in London. It's going to be local jobs. It's going to be local people building homes. It's going to be local work that's done that's always going to be needed, no matter what sort of AI and quantum computing and international globalization comes to impact on things, there are skills that we have, and you're right, Sarah, we do have to do a much better job of highlighting that in cities that smaller towns and more rural communities have already understood the path towards great jobs on that. So we're going to keep working on that as well. So thank you, Denisha, for your question. Okay, we'll take some questions from here, and we're going to go through. Yes, you go ahead. Because Calgary.
Yeah, thank you for coming here. And first of all, thank you for calling out Nenshi. We love him. He's a great mayor. I do have...
What's your name?
Oh, yeah. My name's Theo, and you can spell it like the one. Theone. Hi, Mom and Dad. Please be proud of me. I know I'm on the TV. Okay, I'll get to my question. So... like you said, you want to make sure that like the people here are provided for, or the ones who work here are Canadians and residents. And honestly, like especially in London, we saw the housing price go really high. And one of our priorities is obviously getting a house for ourselves. And there's a lot of houses we heard that are empty because they're bought out by people outside of Canada that doesn't live here. And how are you going to address that? Is there going to be like a certain cap where you can actually help the people who live here in Canada? That way the prices doesn't go high and crazy like it is. So I'm a very aggressive person, I'm sorry.
Not at all. It's a very good question.
Okay. And also, like, especially in London, we're one of the fastest growing cities here. We have great, MPs, that's why. And so we need more jobs to be provided, especially for a student that's going to graduate. What's your kind of like goals for London? How are you going to help this city grow and make sure we're provided the jobs that, that are good for us graduating? So, yeah, but thank you for coming here. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Theo.
Okay, you're welcome.
You in the back row.
Thank you. My name is Deepshikha and I'm doing digital communication management. And my actually major concern is about healthcare. You talk about family doctors and how things are going to be provided. But my question is the easy accessible. Because when I came here, I'm new in Canada and honestly I love being here. But when I came here, I gone through some very minor medical condition, but even in the emergency care, it took 8 to 12 hours waiting, and then they gave me like 6 to 7 months of wait list for minor surgery. And because of that, I went through twice that small surgery. So my question is how it will be easily available, because it's not. And I love being here, but at certain point, I was like ready to go back to my home country, where like in my home country, medical is very easily available. So, and I spend my whole winter without shoes and socks, so it's very difficult, right? So that's my question, how it will be easily available.
Thank you. And then you in the picture. Yep, go ahead.
Namaste, sir. I'm a biggest fan of you and I'm following you on Instagram. So, I know under your leadership, your government is really doing the best for Canada. So I just want to give me a few tips on leadership skills. That's my question.
What's your name?
Tirth Joshi.
Okay. First of all, Theon, as housing, Canada is a very good place to invest for people around the world. And unfortunately, there's been a trend over the past while of people buying housing and real estate as investments for the future, particularly non-resident, non-Canadians who are looking at this as a good way of protecting their portfolios from elsewhere around the world. We put a 2-year freeze on foreign, non-resident, non-Canadian home buyers. We've brought in measures, and we're working with the provinces to continue to bring in measures to really emphasize that a house should be a home for a family to live in and not an investment vehicle. And that's something that we are going to continue to work on, because we need to make sure that people can, all the homes we have, all the apartments we have, everything needs to be accessible and available for Canadians to build their futures on, and that's very much something that we're continuing to work on. Lipchika, access to doctors, accelerating change in our healthcare system is exactly why we have laid down very serious markers in terms of data collection and outcomes that the provinces are going to be investing in. When we are in the process right now of negotiating with the province of Ontario, for example, they're going to have to, as we deliver billions of dollars to Ontario to make improvements in healthcare, they're going to have to show that wait times for surgeries like that are coming down, that they're creating better things. Because once you have data, and you can say, wow, for that same surgery, if you'd been in Manitoba or if you'd been in British Columbia, you only would have had to wait 6 weeks instead of 6 months. Well, what are they doing differently there? And the Ontario delivery of healthcare is going to be accountable to you saying, well, wait, they do this a lot faster in another part of the country. I'm supposed to be able to get the same quality of service everywhere across the country. Being able to compare apples to apples is a really, really important piece of that. And finally, your question on leadership. Well, first of all, thank you for being a really biggish or bigger or biggie fan of mine on Instagram. Leadership is about gathering the very best people around you possibly can. Everyone thinks that leadership is somehow some solo thing where, the right person stands forward, hey, okay, everybody follow behind me, right? Well, no. Leadership is about getting those people who you're able to gather around and make sure they can deliver the very best of themselves. What a leader does is helps put you in the position to succeed for yourself, able to contribute to your maximum with whatever you need. What a leader gets to do is sees, okay, you need a little bit more of this, and you need a little bit more of that, so let me figure out how to give you this, and let me put you with a mentor that can help you do that, and then come along. And that perspective of leadership isn't always, could spend an hour talking about this, and there are entire university degrees focused on this, and I'm not going to fill it. But just that particular element for me has been the really, really important thing about leadership. It's not about your own abilities to tell people what to do. It's about making sure that people are able to actually deliver the very best of themselves in the shared project you have. And the way I got that and where I learned that from was from being a teacher. Because a good teacher isn't someone who has all the answers and hands them out to the students and says, okay, now go forth and you got all the answers. A good teacher is someone who helps the students figure out the answers for themselves, discover their own strength, their own confidence, and is then able to tackle whatever challenge with the ability, the experience, and the understanding, having had a guide there to help shape that success. A good politician, a good leader of a country, is about putting the building blocks in place so everyone in the country can be as successful as possible, because, achieving your potential, whether it's by making sure there's affordable childcare or good health care or peaceful, safe communities or less racism and intolerance. These are the things that governments and leaders need to put into place to allow people to fully succeed. And that for me, focusing leadership on how to get the very best out of the people around you instead of how to be the very best leader yourself, because that matters. It's the people that come with you. Someone who jumps in front of a parade and calls that leadership isn't actually bringing people along. And that key is at the center of it all. We unfortunately are almost out of time, so I'll take 3 last questions from here. You in the blue shirt first. Yeah, because you put your hand up quickest. Nope, behind, sorry, the bright blue shirt. You got Mike's coming over.
Thank you so much, sir, and I'm so happy to be here. And your administration actually, you've stressed inclusiveness, and you've said that a lot, and I must commend you for your work on that. And as my friend said, I just hope that workplace inclusiveness is actually, extends to the rest of us. And also, I must also commend your administration on integration and being able to integrate newcomers into PR pathway. And I really, really appreciate that and what you've been doing. To the rest of us and international students here in Canada, thank you so much. And also, my wife also benefited from that because she's here on spouse work permit. So thank you so much. Remarkably recently, you actually extended the postgraduate work permit by 18 months. Thank you so much for that as well. And but here is my concern and what is on the lips of the rest of us here who are still students. We just hope that you extend the 18 months to the rest of us who will graduate soon. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Okay, another question. You in the back in the middle. There you go. It's coming around behind you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Yvonne, and I teach in the respiratory therapy program at Fanshawe College. You had a few questions regarding access to healthcare, and my question is related to healthcare as well. Sounds like there's great plans for investment in healthcare federally for nursing and doctors, and I would like to ask if there's any plans to involve allied healthcare professions in those plans as well.
Sorry, what do you mean allied healthcare professions?
Such as respiratory therapy, physiotherapy, and so on. There's a few of us part of that category. So my question is, if you had the power to make one change in the next 12 months to increase access to education for allied health professions, what would it be? Or what would you advise us to do locally, provincially, to increase access to education in healthcare professions?
Excellent. And last question. Get someone there for. How about you in the front? There you go.
It's very nice to be here, and it's nice to meet you in person. My name is Uru. I'm a student of operations management here at Fanshawe. My question is can we hope and expect a clearer and probably easier pathway for us international students to PR?
Great questions, but the first and the third question aligned. Canada is a country that has done extraordinarily well because of immigration, and we will continue to succeed because of immigration. And it's not just getting more people in, it's the kind of people who are willing to leave their home community, their own language, their home family bubble, and cross the world to try and challenge themselves, learn new things, build a new life. That's the kind of initiative, that's the kind of drive that leads to a more successful society in general. It's been the story of Canada, for millennia. From people crossing the Bering Land Bridge to try and strike out into new territories and build new lives with the indigenous peoples, to the waves of immigration that have come across this country over the past generations and even centuries. The kinds of people who settle here, the kinds of people who come here are the ones that are not afraid of, rolling all the dice and betting on themselves and their ability to succeed in a totally different place from what they grew up with. And that is an extraordinary advantage to any society that'll take them in. And of course, there are places in the world where that happens a lot better than others. In Canada, and used to be the United States, but still the United States to a certain extent, does a really good job of that. I mean, Canada so much so that we've understood that the best way to define a Canadian isn't by a skin color or even a language, because from the very beginning we had, two different opposite languages. If you talk about European, the English and the French were at war for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then from the very founding of this country, there was an understanding that someone totally different from you, because they were French-speaking, or you were French-speaking, they were English-speaking, was just as much and legitimately a Canadian as you were. So that idea that someone totally different could also be a full Canadian is something that worked well as an idea at first, took many, many years and generations and lots of learning of discrimination and trying to work through it before we got to where we are. But we are now in a place where what a typical Canadian looks like isn't something that has any real meaning for most of us. What values we ascribe to: openness, respect, compassion, a willingness to work hard, but a desire to see your neighbors succeed as well, being there for each other in times of difficulty. Like, that's something that we can all aspire to and ascribe to, because they're fundamental humanist values. I mean, these are things that any community in the world would want to see. But in Canada, we articulated them in a Charter of Rights and Freedoms that makes it core to our identity. So being open to immigration is something that really, really works and matters for us, because it gives a depth of richness and experience to this country. But one of the things that's really important with our immigration system, and where we see immigration systems falter around the world and societies turn against immigration, is when immigration isn't something that the government is doing a good job of controlling, of doing responsibly and respectfully. In Europe, when people just flooded into the country from Syria, into the continent, from Syria, from the Middle East, from Africa, it destabilizes people's confidence in immigration in general. The challenges the United States is facing with its southern border, even the issues that Canada had over the past few years with Roxham Road, was enough to make people go, oh, maybe we have to be really careful about immigration. Never really got that bad in Canada, because people know that we do have a strong immigration system. But that's why there are really important rules that we have to follow. And yes, we are stepping up in the process in terms of accelerating the pathway for permanent residency for international students, because quite frankly, people here with Canadian education experience, people who've lived here for a few years, learned to love this place, learned to survive a few winters, which is never an automatic given. They make for excellent permanent residents and eventual Canadians. So we are absolutely looking at that. But the reality is, over the past few years, the challenges of the pandemic and keeping the borders closed, and then reopening them and catching up and reaching our goals of over 400,000 new citizens this year means there's a lot of pressure on our systems, at the same time as we're having to step up to welcome people from Afghanistan, to support people in Ukraine, to help people fleeing from all sorts of different parts of the world. We have a big, successful immigration system, but we're in the process of trying to improve it and make it better. But one of the things we are regularly talking about is better pathways to citizenship for permanent residents. So thank you for that question, Uru, and thank you for your comments as well. And finally, in terms of my best recommendation for healthcare, I'm not going to get into delivery of healthcare, because the federal government doesn't deliver much in the way of healthcare. And where we do deliver healthcare in on-reserve Indigenous services across the country, we can't say, hey, we do the best job of any healthcare district in the country. There are huge challenges in that. So I don't have a deep expertise in allied services or anything. But I am a bit of a data geek. And I know that if you want to improve something, you want to make a difference in something, you should be able to measure it. People respond to facts, to numbers, to measuring improved outcomes. And that's why in our healthcare negotiations with the provinces, we've been focused on getting the data. When the pandemic first started, we suddenly realized we had no reliable way at Public Health Canada of really collating and understanding what the new cases of this, what would become COVID-19, and when we named it, new flu coming in from different parts of the country. We couldn't even compare them because they were being collected in different ways, and we were getting faxes in from some places, and computer readouts in and other places. And it was like super complicated. We realized, oh my God, we've got to coordinate how data is collected and how it's analyzed. And it worked for a while on COVID, but as soon as the pandemic started to recede, everyone fell back into their old habits of doing things their own way. And quite frankly, not being able to compare straight data from one system to another is a good way of being able to avoid accountability if you suspect your system might not be quite as performing as the other system. Well, no, we have different inputs or different outputs or different ways of measuring it. Well, no. If you want to actually have a clear idea of what's working well in and across our medical systems in this country, or even across and within medical systems within a province. I've heard from Doug Ford a whole bunch of times the challenges of all the different medical systems within the province of Ontario. Well, being able to collect clean, solid, interpretable and similarly collected data across the system will allow us to point out what are the most effective forms of support. What is the best way to get the right outcomes? What is the best way to do things? And that focus, whether it's on allied medical services or core medical services or family doctors or emergency room visits or surgeries or the staffing challenges, having better data that you can understand, that you can collate, that you can compare, and being solid on the integrity of that data is what allows you to make the case most cleanly and strongly for more investments here. And this system's not working that well. You need to change it or reduce it. I mean, those are the kinds of conversations that we have to have, that we can have now that we're much more anchored in real measurement of data, which is the big transformation we're doing over the coming years in healthcare. Well, thank you all very much for taking